welcome to Matt's Mission Marine, your home for my take on boats, waterways, conversations along the way. Today we're going to talk to Chad, a friend of mine I've known for 20 years. He's going to talk about how he got into boating, some of his experiences on the water, and then he's going to tell us about a trip that he went on where he double checked everything before he left, did all his safety checks, radio calls, bilge pump checks, and still everything went wrong and he didn't come back with the boat. And we're going to hear that story today. Yeah. All right, Chad, so you built boats one time, right?
Yes.
Who'd you work for?
I worked for Rampage Yachts, part of KCS. So they built cruisers, Rampage, and Shamrock.
I got you. And how long did you work for them?
7 years.
Kind of walk through the process of what it takes to build a boat.
Yeah, I mean, so working there, those were production fiberglass boats. So, they start, the very beginning is the lamination process. And they start with a mold. So it's kind of like, in a way, like if you were going to bake a cake, you put it in there, and that's kind of the mold. We take it for granted, but that cake pan is a mold. So there's a whole mold, and then there's other pieces that are molds too. So, we built inboard diesel boats, so there were a lot of parts. But the main parts are the hull and the deck, and then you've got liners and different inserts that go in there. So you start, essentially you built from the outside in. So you wax the mold really good. They usually wax it 5 times, and then they spray the gel coat in there, which is kind of like a paint. It's a polyester resin based paint. And then at that moment, they start building up the laminate schedule. There may be some core mat to prevent print through, and then the wetted fiberglass cloth material would go in there, and then there's some core to give it some separation and strength, and then more laminate. And if it's the hull of the boat, then there would be structure in there, stringers that run the length of the boat, and then bulkheads that run crossways or athwartships.
All right. And what part of that process were you in? Were you involved in, or kind of all of it, or what?
A little bit of all of it over that period of time. When I started there, I had even put in my resume before they'd even built the building. I mean, I was hungry, eager to go in there, sending out resumes, trying to get my foot in the door because I was essentially right out of college. And they said, okay, we're going to have an engineering department, but you're going to have to wait a little bit. Are you willing to work on the assembly line? And I said, yeah, I'm willing to do that. And I had some experience with boats and doing, small projects and things like that on my own, but it was a huge eye-opening experience there. So worked on the assembly line, did a lot of electrical, but over that course of that 7 years, did just about everything there in that shop.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, these were production boats, so they were relatively high volume. They were inboard diesel. We also did gasoline, but mostly just incline shaft where, you've got the shaft and propeller that come out of the bottom of the boat, and strut and rudder, that sort of arrangement. And there were a few pod boats that were built where it's a propulsion assembly under the boat there at the end of that run. But that's primarily what we built there.
And let's talk about the time you worked on a boat. How long did you work on the boat, and do you have any experiences from that you want to share?
Yeah, so my last couple years in college, I landed a job working as a mate, first mate on a sport fishing boat in right around Southport, North Carolina. The boat at the time was based at Bald Head Island, which is right across the river, and had the opportunity to get on that boat. And I had fished my whole life since I was a kid. And saltwater was somewhat limited, mostly 10 to 15 mile range, primarily black sea bass, king mackerel, that kind of thing, but no blue water, no like big game type fishing. So I wanted to get on with this boat, and it was a 38-foot Bertram, and got on, had the opportunity to work for him. His name's Paul Thompson. He still runs charters today. It's Impulsive Charters, and we're actually still good friends. I talked to him last week.
Nice.
But it was interesting because when I started for him, I didn't have that much experience, and he was tough. He was tough on me, and he said, all right, well, I went with him, and he had somebody else kind of halfway working for him on that first trip. and I was right out of school. It was that year. It was like middle of May, and we went out. We just did a half-day Spanish mackerel trip, pretty straightforward. And we came back, and he said, "Okay, well, why don't you come with me next time, and we'll see how that goes, and then we'll go from there." So met him at the dock. We go out. That particular trip was another half-day trip. And caught a bunch of Spanish mackerel. You know, it's a good time. May's a really good time for that. Okay. And we came back to the dock, and you know, I'm cleaning up the boat, cutting fish, doing all that kind of stuff. And the party who hired Paul, you know, he came up to me and he said, "All right, well, I want to give you a tip." And I said, "No, you don't have to do that." I said, he's like, "Really? I do." I said, "No, it's okay." And they left. They packed up and they were gone. And then Paul said, he said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, everything's good." He said, "That man wanted to give you a tip." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but I didn't want to take it." And he said, "Well, you need to understand, I'm not paying you this year." He said, "You're working 100% on tips. So when they tell you they're giving you a tip, you need to take it." So they didn't have to tell me that again. Every time, you know, I earned it. So if they wanted to give me a tip, whatever it was, I would take it. And that first summer, I did 100% on tips. And, you know, it wasn't a place like Hatteras or Oriental Fishing Center where you have all these boats and you got a cleaning station. I mean, small operation. There were only 2 charter boats there. The other one was a 46-foot Hatteras. And I mean, the mates there, I mean, we did everything. We washed the boats, cleaned the fish. I mean, pretty much everything. I even booked a lot of charters because we were strategically right across from the ice cream store there, Baudette. And there's not much there. And at the time, there was an ice cream shop right there. And as I would be cleaning the boat in the afternoons, you know, people would be eating ice cream and they'd walk up, "Hey, what'd you catch today?" And we'd start small talk. And they say, "Well, you have any openings?" So, you know, I was able to help Paul book a lot of trips. You know, when he wasn't there, sometimes he would have to run an errand or do something when we came in. And so, you know, I did a lot and I learned a lot. Well, fast forward to the next summer, Paul started calling me early. And he said, "Hey, you gonna work for me this year?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna work for you, Paul, but you know, I don't get out of school till, you know, middle of May." And he's like, "Okay, well, I just want to make sure." And I said, "Well, okay, but you're gonna have to pay me this year too." He's like, "Okay, I'm gonna pay you this year. You earned it." So, yeah, but I learned a lot about working with people, running a business, charter fishing. I mean, there's a lot that goes into charter fishing in addition to catching fish. That's part of it. That's a big part of it, but there's a lot more to it than that. And yeah, I learned. It was a really awesome experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about the time that you went out and the boat didn't come back with you.
Yeah.
And what that was like, and you know, the process. And thank God you're here with us. First off.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've had some close calls, but that was definitely the closest call, and it was actually, we're here in Charleston. It's Wapu Cut, and you know, I could basically, the beginning of the story is I think it was March 30th. We were getting the boat ready March 30th, 2013, on a Friday, and Easter was early that year. It was on, I think it was April 1st, which was that Sunday. But it's kind of burned in my mind on when that was. So the day before we were going fishing, my girlfriend at the time, we're now married, that's 7 years ago. Some of her family was down in town, and we were going to take them out fishing. Okay. And so her 2 brothers were here, and at the time I had a roommate who was a police officer for the city of Charleston, and he had a boat, and he had a 28-foot Pursuit, and his parents had a bigger boat. They had a Hatteras, and then they had a Hartman Palmer 60-foot boat over in Charleston Harbor. So they had boats their whole life, and David had spent, you know, he'd grown up going to the Bahamas and the Keys and going over. I mean, he had been around boats since he was a kid.
Right.
And so anyway, they had this 28-foot Pursuit, and we said maybe we can get in on an early wahoo bite. So we said, yeah, the end of March, you know, might be, you know, we've got to kind of watch the weather and let's kind of plan for it. And so as that week progressed, it looked like we were going to have a weather window on that Saturday, and it was going to be kind of moderate in the morning, but then kind of blow up in the afternoon. And we said, all right, well, we're just going to watch it, and we're going to come back in the afternoon. And so that evening on that Friday, we went and filled the boat up full of fuel. It was sitting on the trailer. You know, they keep it in the water a lot, but it had been out of the water for the winter, basically.
Gotcha.
And we cleaned the boat up, got everything squared away, filled it full of fuel, and actually launched it right here at this ramp. It's normally where we launched it. Put it in, checked the bilge pumps, they were working, and we had washed it down, and it had rainwater in it, things like that. And when we backed it down the ramp, you know, we stopped there, which is kind of customary, and we let all the water go to the back, and the automatic bilge pumps came on, and they were pumping good. They were, you know, 1500, 2000 series. I mean, they were heavy duty bilge pumps, and they were pumping good streams. So that's working well. We pull out and did a radio check here as we were idling through the cut. It worked, got a response back, that sounded good. I said, all right, well, everything's looking good, full of fuel, safety stuff's working. So we go and tie it up in there. They had 2 slips, and we tied it up in the open slip in front of their bigger boat. And so the next morning we got ready. I think we even might have brought down ice the night before, but that Saturday morning we got out, we brought all the rods down. You know, we had all our heavy duty Wahoo gear on there, 50 wads. Everything was rigged up, and you know, we were ready. And you know, had our foul weather gear on. It looked like it was going to be, you know, 2 to 3 foot going out, and it was calling for 4 to 6 foot, 15 to 20 knots in the afternoon, and we were going to work our way back. And so we had a good plan, and we basically got an early start. I don't know, we headed out. By the time we got the boat loaded and everything, it was probably about 6 a.m. Go out the harbor, and we're rolling. We got a waypoint. We had looked at the sea surface temperature maps, and we're thinking, okay, well, here's this first edge. It's right on Edisto Banks, which is really the first drop out of here. If you take more of a southeast heading, maybe 50 miles, something like that. Right there where the contour goes from about 140, 150 feet, and it has much sharper, you know, incline to it. And so that's where we were headed. So we go out there, and we're looking for that 70-degree water. It was less than 70 on the inside. On the beach, it was about 58. So, you know, we ran 58-degree water for a long ways, and then it started creeping up. And then right before we got to Edisto Banks, it got up to about 69 degrees. And so we put our lines out, and we started trolling out in a little bit deeper water. So we started in about 150. We decided we're going to work out about 200 and just zigzag in that shallower edge on that reef line as we were marking bait. And we fished up until about lunchtime, and we didn't have any strikes. It was just, and the wind started picking up a little bit earlier than we had planned. There was one other charter boat that was working near us. It was the only boat we saw all day. It was probably a 50-foot something sport fish. And so that was kind of always a comfort when you're out there, especially in a smaller boat, and at least see another boat, and you're like, okay, they're out here. And it was a good charter boat that fishes out of Mount Pleasant, and I figured, well, if he's fishing here, you know, this must be, you know, he's kind of seeing what we were seeing on temperature charts. And so we kept working it, and nothing. And everything was fine. The boat ran well going out there, all the electronics, all the instrumentation. And we decided to come back in on the ledge and jig some before we came back in. You know, that's usually kind of the way to save the day, to catch something. You know, the Wahoo bite looked like it was not going to materialize. So we come in there and we start jigging, and this other charter boat was kind of working around us, and he was zigzagging. I didn't see him catch any fish, but they may have. And it was getting around, I think around 1 o'clock, and we said the winds picked up another notch, starting to get a lot more whitecaps out here, and fish aren't biting. You know, we caught a few small fish there on the jig, and we said, all right, let's get ready to pack it up. And it was interesting because that sport fish boat was to the north of us at that moment, about maybe half a mile away, and I see him starting to get on plane. Wow, he's leaving at the same time. That's kind of cool. And you know, I knew he was from Mount Pleasant. I knew the name of the boat. And so we go to get on plane, and the boat didn't want to get on plane. The engines were fine. It had twin 200, maybe the 200, 225 Yamahas. They were 2 strokes, OX 66s, so not direct injection, just carbureted 2 strokes. Strong engines though, and they were trying. Both of them were in sync, but it's like the boat was heavy. and I had this sinking feeling in my stomach. And I think David at that point was running the boat. And I said, just pull it back. And because he looked at me and he's like, what do you think? And I said, well, they're both tacking the same amount. You know, it's not like one's doing something different. We pulled them back, and I basically opened the back compartment that goes down the bilge, and the level of water that was in the boat from the bottom of the hull was even with the deck. So the entire bottom of that boat was full, and it's a fairly deep V. It's probably, I don't know, 28 pursuit, maybe 18 degrees dead rise, something. So it's a pretty good V in it, and it's got a beam on it, and all that was full of water. That triangular cross section from the front to the back was full of water. So we're hitting the manual bilge pumps, and nothing's happening. And so at that moment, I get on the radio and I call the other boat, and I'm calling out first Mayday. And at this moment, he was in sight, but he was heading on out. He was like going to the horizon. And so I call Mayday, call it several times, and I don't see him come off plane. I don't see him turn, and I go to get the flare. So I'm like, this is our chance, because there's not a soul out here. And I don't know if the radio's working. I don't know what channel he's on, but most of those charter boats have 2 radios, and they keep one on 16 all the time. So I go to get the flares, load one in. It was the 12 gauge kind that go in the pistol. I put the shell in, and I'm getting ready. You know, I'm ready for it to go off. Click, nothing happens. Well, I had 3 more in that pack, and there was a new pack that I opened. Put another one in there, click, nothing. Put another one, click, nothing. Well, there were some older ones that were expired, but we kept them on the boat just for this case. Went through those. Nothing came out into that gun. And so it had and we're waving, stuff like that, but I mean, you know, at this point, they're looking, you know, most of the guys are probably in the boat, cracking a cold one, and the captain's looking ahead. He's not looking behind him. So, but we're trying everything we can think of. And the engines are running. We're still maintaining headway, but we're only making about 8 knots. That's it. That's wide open. I mean, so that's all it's going to do. And so then there was a mirror in there, like a safety mirror that they have, survival mirror, and it had a protective film on it. So I'm like, well, I know these mirrors can really work. You know, I knew about them. You know, had my captain's license, went through all the safety training. I pulled the protective film off, and the actual the coating on the lens, the mirror, came off. So I had a piece of glass in my hand, and I had no mirror. So while this was going on, my brother-in-laws, Brian and Eric, they're, you know, everybody was pretty calm for what happened the whole time, but everybody knew it was serious. And as soon as the boat was full, I said, guys, let's try to get this water out of the boat, and we're going to try to get this other boat's attention. It's, you know, we got a big problem.
As always, guys, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, ringing the bell, and selecting all so you don't miss any of my content. Got some really good stuff coming out there for you guys. Really need your support. Thanks, guys. Alright, y'all. Until next time, strap on those life vests and get going on the water. I'll be seeing you soon.